Oi, oi, right, right. How's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is the Doodle Review. It's time for the big list, the top 50 albums of the year 2024. We've just spent the last few days going through some honorable mentions in each genre category. We've done rock, we've done pop, rap, we've done jazz, but now it's time for the big one, the best of the best of the best of the best albums in every genre combined. For some context, I've done the maths, and this year I've listened to about 230 new albums. That's only counting stuff that's been released this year and that I got to give the minimum amount of like 5 full listens that I then reviewed. Just a reminder that I have a lot of playlists available, which are linked in the description. I've done quarterly playlists that mix one song from every album I listen to in a 3-month stretch. I've got playlists for my top 10 honorable mentions in all of those categories that I mentioned. And now I have a playlist for this one track from each of the 50 killer albums of the top 50. The disclaimer next to me are a selection of albums that I didn't get to this year. So I obviously couldn't place. I've heard they're good. I'll get to them at some point, and you can be sure that a review will follow. But other than that, let's bed in. This is a long one. All right. We're starting things off nice and chill with the singer-songwriter release from Chris Cohen. This came out completely out of left field for me. I tried it on a whim, having never heard of Cohen, who apparently was once a member of Deerhoof, and I fell in love with its low-key, oddball vibe. I would say if you took Riley Walker, A Savage from Parquet Court, a touch of Wilco, and a dash of Sufjan Stevens, you've got a little approximation of what this is like, but ultimately it's not that deep. It's just enjoyable and inventive. Listen to the track Randy's Chimes if you want a taste of what this is like. Hey, so if there's one person that can take a song about wanting a hot dog with ketchup and mustard and relish, it's the Swami himself, Mr. John Reese. This is a little garage rock, garage punk ripper that's well worth your time if you like Rocket from the Crypt, Hot Snakes, or any of the other million projects that Speedo's involved with. If you like underground rap artist Open Mike Eagle, then hopefully you've already heard of this project. If not, you're in for a treat. Formalizing the now long-standing tradition of features and guest verses from Video Dave and Still Rift on Open Mike's solo albums, this project creates for us fans a new rap trio, Previous Industries. The group come together on this record to build on the talking points that often permeate their songs, the old school 80s, 90s home analog entertainment media and artifacts of that age, the forgotten institutions, the previous industries of Laserdisc, VHS, VCR, and CRT TVs. Service Merchandise brings this theme together with great beats from the likes of Child Actor and Smoke Benito, delivers a lightweight, nostalgic, humorous, and warm album experience. Back across to garage rock now, this time from more of like a 60s psych revival point of view with Jeff and Stephen McDonald, aka Red Cross. The album gets a little long in the tooth with some weird cuts in its second half, but for the most part, this is melodic, fun, scuzzy DIY garage rock. Laetitia Sadier is most known as the frontwoman of the cult 90s krautrock meets art rock fusion project Stereolab, and this year she put out her 5th solo project. Rooting for Love is the album for you if, in particular, you love that French pop kind of sound. If you love music where you could quite easily envision yourself sitting outside a cafe with a coffee and a cigarette on the go, just like watching the world go by, this one is for you. Look no further. A touch of ambient jazz now with Dave Harrington, an artist that fans of electronic music might be familiar with from being one half of the duo Dark Side with Nicolas Jarre. In addition to that group, he's worked with tons of other artists on soundtrack work and remixes, but also free jazz collaborations, as well as a completely freeform collaborative project with Patrick Shiroishi and Max Jaff called Speak Moment that came out this year. Harrington also released this beauty, Skull Dream. It's a more direct and groove-based album that touches on multiple different styles, from the cinematic with pieces like Acid Western to kind of flangey, smooth 80s sounds on VistaVision. Melvins are one of those bands that put out an album or two every year. For me, as much as they are legends, I find their work hit or miss. This year, though, Tarantula Heart was most definitely a hit. The record kicks things off with a 20-minute mega track, Pain Equals Funny. Normally, a runtime like that would have me checking my watch, but honestly, it's incredible. Some of the most majestic Melvins guitar work up against some of the dirtiest. The last 5-10 years have been a bit of a golden age period of like lightweight indie rock meets heart-wrenching emo meets thrilling pop punk, and Oso Oso are one of the most consistent in this crop. If you like the vulnerability of Pine Grove but also like unashamed Warped Tour whiny pop punk chorus hooks, this could be your next favorite band. A reaction to devastating grief on the part of Carrie Brownstein, whose parents both tragically died in a car accident while vacationing in Italy. Sleater-Kinney's latest is a motoric, mechanical, robotic album punctuated by explosions of raw organic rage as its songwriters process sudden and senseless loss. The Road to Hell is paved with good intentions, plays like a mix you'd hear on some obscure electronic radio station driving down pitch black motorway on a late night drive. A good comparison is actually the last One of Tricks Point Never record. I really enjoyed the experimentations with classical he put forward on that album, but more often than not he would follow those parts down some like really abstract tangents. Here Vegans managed to achieve a similar thing while making just genuinely enjoyable and thought-provoking tracks. On this first solo record from Black MIDI guitarist vocalist Geordie Greep, the slightly odd sounding but nonetheless enigmatic virtuoso has managed to turn the dial even more on that musicianship, turn it on the dial on the complexity, and somehow produce something really listenable and really fun, weaving together a weird kind of satirical social narrative and combining that with elements of samba and Brazilian influences. The new sound is probably one of the most accurate album titles ever. This could probably be higher for me, but honestly, I'm still at a stage of being in awe of it that its brilliance hasn't fully hit home. Do believe the hype. I always look forward to a new Nilüfer Yanya album, and with My Method Actor, she may have come through with her very best yet. Her unique delivery, both vocally and on the guitar, has always been a draw, but on this record, it's been met head on with super sharp songwriting skills, and the results are fantastic. Nubya Garcia is a British saxophonist and band leader, and her 2020 album Source completely blew me away. 2024 has seen her come through with another epic that completely knocked me for six in a year in which I was anticipating another cosmic level masterpiece from Kamasi Washington. This Odyssey came through and kind of blew it out the water. Now, I've been a fan of Fontaines since the first record, and I loved the sensitivity of Heroes and the burning intensity of Skinty, but damn, does it feel good to have a hooky, instant, accessible, and at some points actually fun Fontaines D.C record. Starburster is a game changer of a track. Here's the Thing beautifully embraces the don't bore us, get to the chorus mantra. And Favorite has the holy grail of indie rock, which is a riff that can be sung by pissed up punters in the growing festival crowds. This, I think, is their best album yet. I almost let this new one from Magdalena Bay slip past me. For some reason, the first couple of listens just didn't connect, but I'm thankful that whatever funk that I was in, I got over, because this sophisticated Kylie-esque, Goldfrapp-esque dance pop is pretty much heavenly. The Hard Quartet brings together Stephen Malkmus of Pavement, Matt Sweeney of Chavez, and kind of everyone, Jim White of 33 and Emmett Kelly of the Cairo Gang. The alternative rock pedigree is off the charts in this band, and as such it makes perfect sense that the songs on the record just kind of sort of sound like they've fallen out of them, effortlessly kind of stumbling from their instruments into your ears. This quartet have produced a killer off-kilter LP that is greater than the sum of its parts, and I'm looking forward to writing about this one in a lot more depth. Umbra Vitae is a Take No Prisoners all-out assault from Jacob Bannon of Converge and a cohort of merciless metal mercenaries. If you're a fan of metal, particularly into your Slayer, it really won't take long for songs like Belief is Obsolete to get under your skin, partially because the track would have just flayed it off. I absolutely love how Filthy Underneath brought together such a wide variety of instruments while keeping the whole project cohesive and of a piece with the whole aesthetic and thematic through line. There's a factory pressed industrial tone to everything, and yet a song like Hyperrealism with its simple, stark, lightweight piano and synth manages to sound at home with the slinky eastern groove of Food for Fuel. Some of my favorite songs include the explosive, almost nonsensical choruses of Topless Mother, the flanged bass high note guitar of See My Girl that Back's probably one of the most emotionally vulnerable songs on the record, and the marching death disco that's somehow gritty but also uplifting of Greatest Dancer. As a hip-hop head, I was ashamed to say I'd never listened to Rakim, but this year changed all that with God's Network. And it's sick. If you're into 90s boom bap classic hip hop, this is for you. It's fully produced by Rakim, which is wild. I didn't know he was also a maestro behind the desk as well as in front of the mic. Tracks like Pendulum Swing have a killer Cuban Links feeling vibe to them. That track in particular is also wild because it's about 6 minutes long and sees Rakim joined by King Crooked, LA the Dark Man, Cannabis, and Chino XL, all of them going off. Don't sleep on this record if you're into gritty old school hip hop with great wordplay from classic charismatic stars. One of my favorite discoveries this year is the Mesthetics. They were formed by post-hardcore legends Fugazi, the bassist and drummer Joe Lally and Brendan Canty for that band, and they partnered up with avant-garde guitarist Anthony Purog. The group have a few albums, but this year they decided to partner up with James Brandon Lewis, who's a jazz composer and saxophonist from Buffalo, New York. One of the things that I love about the album is that the album they've produced together is that it completely avoids hamming it up for an audience that might be drawn in by the clickbaity jazz punk gutsy of it all. I mean, that's exactly how I came into it, but tracks like Lorso immediately subvert expectation of some sort of fast tempo punk freak out with sax solos. This one opens with a wandering jazz scale started by a clean toned guitar and finished by Lewis's sax. The scale they're improvising from feels kind of off when the sax comes in underneath it and then creates this kind of weird effect where it almost legitimizes it, even though it's playing the same notes. As we move forward, Pirog gets to rip an abstract solo while Joe Lally plays these kind of staccato bass chords that give the track a deep groove. It's not until the following track, Emergence, that the album delivers maybe a little of what you'd expect from the jazz punk descriptor, with these heavy power chord movements that almost give the Stooges or even like a Queens of the Stone Age in their tonality, but feel natural either side of the sax scales and Fripp-esque guitar solo weirdness. That thing then drops into a lower but funkier gear with a killer riff and groove. It almost gives off a kind of hit it and quit it funkadelic vibe. Mike's an old hip-hop killer that I've got a lot of time for, but I wasn't familiar at all with Tony Seltzer prior to this release. I found the style that he brings to the instrumentals on Pinball, they're really interesting. He has a real talent for layering a lot of quite vague melodic tones, atmospheric samples, and synth pads to immerse the listener in a certain vibe, and then dropping these kind of hooky elements that just barely poke their head up from out of the instrumental soup, but either complement or contrast the underlying layers such that they still really hit. Take the opener Two Door, for instance. You have these kind of psychedelic, long drawn out pads. It almost sounds like sitar mixed with densely reverbed choral singing. And then you just get these little piano notes that aren't overly loud, but just fall like raindrops over this tense atmosphere, simultaneously brightening things up and adding a melodic component that you can latch onto. This is a blast of an album that feels like a full experience despite its exceptionally short runtime, and provides an excellent insight into Mike's world as of 2024, already showing a ton of personal growth and development lyrically from his Burning Desire album from just last year. Did a whole deep dive about this at the start of 2024, so check it out if you're a fan. But if you like underground rap and you haven't been on Mike, give this one a go. It's a great start. Sadly, it sounds like this might be the last we'll hear of Metz for a while, at least after recently announcing their hiatus, but they may well have left us with their best work yet. Arguably, Gravity Hill muddies the already murky stylistic waters of this too punk for indie and too indie for metal band, yet somehow Metz emerged with a clearer, more succinct vision than they've ever captured on record before. Piss Jeans are a post-hardcore band from Pennsylvania. They were already known for their scolding wit and acidic guitars, but this album just hit audiences over the head with that even harder. My absolute favorite thing about this record are the performances themselves. The band are not just tight on Half Divorced, they're livid tight. The kind of tight that seemingly happens when you've been forced to play something again and again and again and again and again. When that level of repetition happens, there tends to be a flow where you start off tight, gradually get looser as you get tired and bored, and then eventually this like frustrated spark runs through the performance right towards the end, like an adrenaline hit. And I don't know if it's the case with but tracks like Seatbelt, Alarm Silencer sound like the band have just reached that frustrated level, like it's the 50th take and they're all so fucking angry and they just want this time to be over. This album's subversive, it's aggressive, it's fast, funny, smart, and just goes hard. While Kim Gordon's latest solo project feels spiritually connected to her previous No Home record, it very much magnifies and expands upon the darkest and grittiest moments of that record to produce something overall, I think, much more industrial in nature. One of the album's biggest achievements, in fact, is how it takes what are undoubtedly digital recordings and manipulations and makes them feel overall a lot more mechanical than technological. The sound design on this record takes a lot of inspiration from the musique concrète movement of the early 20th century experimental producers of France like Pierre Schaeffer. And that might be enough to turn off a lot of people. But if this is your thing, as an experience, as a post-punk no-wave art experience, the collective feels cohesive, confronting, and confident, and it's amazing to hear and see Kim Gordon continue to make an impact in the way that she is right now under her own name outside of Sonic Youth. This album was already pretty cool just on the basis of its release strategy. Releasing it on vinyl for one day only through White's own record stores with almost no fanfare, unless you were kind of like one of the dialed in fanboys. Sadly, I wasn't. But the second reason No Name is really cool is that it's an absolute garage rock barn burner. Probably the rawest, most aggressive, simplistic album Jack White has put his name to since the White Stripes days. As a long-time follower of White's solo work, which has taken its fans on a journey through multiple stylistic explorations, from like old-timey to the just kind of batshit, the back-to-basics approach of No Name is satisfying, not just because it's a taste of the Jack White sound that originally turned a lot of us on, but because it still somehow feels like progression. Over the course of this discography, we've seen Jack take this maximalist approach, adding more and more and more new sounds, new layers, new instruments, new arrangements, new experiments. But No Name feels like the answer to the question of like, how do we retain the soul of everything we've gained over that last decade of exploration while basically removing as many components as possible? And No Name, I think, answers that question and happens to be an absolute blast of a record to listen to at the same time. Navy Blue, aka Sage Elsesser, dropped an excellent record last year called Ways of Knowing, a fantastic slice of personal, heartfelt, underground hip-hop. The record came out on Def Jam, but sadly, in the time since the label dropped him. As a result, the album he had been working on couldn't be released. So Memoirs in Armor has been created as almost a reaction to that situation. The whole record is reflective and steeped in a melancholic vibe, and to me, you really feel this kind of sense of hopelessness and even maybe in a weird way relief, with beats by child actor Nicholas Craven, Budgie Beats and Elsesser himself. They all kind of weave together to create this deep collection of hip hop that, despite the downbeat vibe, like the best cases of melancholia, it just gives you a glimmer of light and creates catharsis. The record's a tight 30 minutes and is definitely up there as one of my favorite underground hip hop albums of the year. The latest Libertines release may have come nearly a full decade after the first reunion album, but with All Quiet, they've managed to deliver a collection of songs that sound beautifully crafted, well thought out, refined, but not at all labored over. There's an energy captured in the recording that feels very raw and very exciting, nothing overly rehearsed, with an endearing looseness, particularly on the guitars. This energy, combined with a really varied track list, makes for a vibrant and dynamic listening experience. I'd never given any time to the Libertines before this, and now I can't wait to get into the older stuff. I think this album does really well, and this is something that kind of struck me almost instantly. It's just how quickly each song gets into it. I mean, obviously the album starts with an instrumental. It's a classical piece for an introduction, And that's pretty engaging and an effective tone setter. But once we get into the album proper, songs like Burn Alive really embrace that classic adage of don't bore us, get to the chorus, hitting us with the earworm I'm not the girl I set out to be hook, which what feels like straight away. It's a solid arrangement tactic, but rarely used within this particular style of art rock or post-punk. Rarely do artists embrace it, as if being reluctant to actually chuck out a hook to the audience is somehow cool. And I think this straight to the point approach is actually key to the album's success as a whole. While the instrumental palette feels regal and the production super sophisticated, the arrangements are unexpectedly simple and direct. I counted actually, and 7 or 8 of the 12 tracks here get to their chorus or a hook within 30 or 40 seconds. On top of that, when they do get to those choruses, they're not just strong, but really dynamic and take a variety of forms. Burn Alive has this kind of new wave Kate Bush dramatic shuffle, while Caesar on a TV screen has this slick, clean guitar bass groove, while Nothing Matters reflects that with a bit of more angular riffy approach. Bittersweet would probably not be dark or transgressive enough of a term to meet Steve Albini's approval, but I can't think of another way to describe the first Shellac album in 10 years that immediately became their last after the sad passing of the underground icon. To All Trains sounds perfectly like what a Shellac record should and does sound like, whether it's Action Park, 1000 Hertz, Dude Incredible, or now this one. The sound captured is so raw, so direct, it's less like listening to a labored record and more like listening to a live set with just the absolute perfect mix. It's another great record in a great catalogue from a great band led by a great man, gone too soon. Rest in peace. In the time since Schoolboy Q's previous, the world kind of ended briefly, which for a short time at least rebalanced most people's kind of perspectives of what's important. But in the case of Quincy Handley, this was a backdrop to getting clean off drugs, reconciling with the muted performance of Crash Talk, his previous, and finding a deep passion and talent for new pursuits like golf. That might sound like a trivial detail, but I mention it because so much of Blue Lips seems to me to be about maturing, seeing things from new perspectives, reprioritizing things, but also working hard to stay true to where you've come from. Growth of the self while not disparaging the circumstances that got you to where you are. Don't get me wrong, the majority of bars are still dark, gritty, and hard as fuck, but this album presents many new dimensions to Q's street-hardened exterior. If I could describe the album musically, it's like a mix of the luxury European traveler vibe of Tyler's Call Me If You Get Lost, blended with the hard horrorcore of a group like Gravediggers. These two color palettes are blended together so seamlessly, it's actually insane. Take Lovebirds, for example. This track literally starts with this smooth jazz and soul sample, great sultry vocal from Lance Skywalker, then just switches on a dime to this stark descending bass with massive filtered drums, and then back again to that low-key soul. Musically, it's pulled off without hitch, but the change in mood kind of makes your head spin, and this happens multiple times throughout the album, making this a wild but fun ride of an album from start to finish. Chelsea Wolfe is a really quite singular sounding singer-songwriter hailing from Northern California. She emerged with her first album, The Grime and the Glow, in 2010 and has since gone on to release 6 follow-ups blending folk, doom, metal, ambient, and now this, her 7th album, adds trip-hop to that list. The album's produced by Dave Sitek of TV on the Radio and pulls lots of influences from artists like Massive Attack, Tricky, and most obviously because of Wolfe's vocal similarities to Beth Gibbons, Portishead. Whispers in the Echo Chamber is the first track on the album and announces the stylistic approach almost instantly with dark, droning, heavy bass interspersed between sparse digital beats until bursting with these long, drawn-out, groaning guitar passages. The next track takes the energy up a gear with a fast-paced rhythm, almost breakbeat-like, droning, distorted guitars. The combination of all of these elements almost like alarm or sounds like in the background also just creates this kind of gothy Matrix action sequence vibe, which is really cool. Overall, this is a dark but lush, deep listening experience that for me is one of the most enjoyable albums Chelsea Wolfe has released to date. When Yard Act first popped up in 2022, I strategically took the decision to give them a bit of a wide berth because there's just so much fucking post-punk coming out these days. Every time I get wind of a new band in the space, I'm always just a bit like, can I can I be asked? This year, I got over myself and I got blown away on the very first track of this kitchen sink fusion of genres that sounds fresh but familiar, artsy but catchy, snarky but friendly. The track itself, called An Illusion, is quite hard to describe. It opens with this mischievous bass line doubled by the guitar, backing the spoken word of James Smith before breaking into this airy cloud of string and flute samples, then an emotional arpeggiated guitar refrain, the occasional drop into this muddy, filtered, very 70s soul and funk section, and ending back with this fluffy, emotional guitar chords before going frankly into this beautiful chamber pop ending. It's barely over 3.5 minutes, and it takes you through all of these styles and just works. Vocally, yes, James Smith certainly is doing the whole spoken word kind of rapping, occasionally singing, sometimes just chatting, every now and again kind of ranting. It's a well-trodden path in post-punk, but lyrically he manages to skewer the same expectations he plays into. Rather than trying to distill societal commentary into purposefully heavy-handed slogans like, say, Idols, saying that with no shade, it works for them. But Smith, with Yard Act, is happy to over-explain, over-analyze, and existentially do that in a way that still comes off down to earth, approachable, and above all, entertaining. This is a great band, and this is a great album. Red Moon in Venus, Uchis' previous album, was one of my favorites of last year, ranked 16 in my top 50, in fact. Going into 2024, I had no idea we'd get another incredible release so soon. Orque DS was a fantastic surprise before we even got out of the month of January. Much like Sin Miedo, Orque DS sees Cali delving back into predominantly Latin forms of music with a full Spanish-speaking record, and the results, I think, are some of her best work. Among a lot of twists, blends, and fusions of reggaeton that give the album its kind of bangers, there are also some really impressive traditional pieces. Temata, coming at the midway point in this album, hits us with some beautifully romantic bolero, while we get dazzling Spanish guitar, gorgeous strings, and a chance for Uchis to really showcase the power of her voice. Orque Diaz is an absolute triumph on so many levels, and now Kali is 4 for 4 in my eyes. She's building an amazing catalogue. Mahash Mashana is a refreshing return to form after the 1940s big band traditional pop of the last Father John Misty record. She cleans up, in particular with its dark, cynical electric piano groove, punctuated by cowbells, guitar stabs, is an immediate crowd pleaser for fans. While the record mostly plays with familiar styles, the instrumentation does also do some kind of colouring outside of the lines. The album's centerpiece, Screamland, for instance, drenches its cathartic melancholy in lush, washed out synths and anchors it in filtered digital beats. It couldn't actually be any more different to the rest of the record, but it totally works, and each chorus hits you like an ocean wave. Worldwide Whack rightly doesn't fix every song to a 1 minute runtime, nor does it look to offer any shiny new gimmicks to one up Whack World, Tierra Whack's debut. That was a cool creative way for Tierra to announce herself creatively, but any further kitschy tricks would probably detract from her genuine talent and just turn her into a novelty act. This long anticipated sophomore album delivers all the charm and fun of the artist's debut, but for me, it's the emotion that's been expanded on Worldwide Whack. And this results in many of my favorite songs on the album. From Numb to Difficult, Tonight, and 27 Club, this record's strength is in its vulnerability. That last track in particular ends the album with a stunningly beautiful and heart-wrenching exploration of what it's like to be someone with suicidal thoughts. And just thinking of the tracks like Dreamlike Music Box Piano is enough to make me well up a little bit. And that's before the lyrics hit. The melody is just so hopeless. At the same time, it's incredibly cathartic in that weird way that only music can do. It would be sad if it wasn't just such a beautiful piece of music. Don't get me wrong though, there's lots of fun still here, like Chanel Pit, Movies, and Shower Song. but the LP really won me over for its heart. GNX is the surprise 6th studio album by Kendrick Lamar, his first LP since absolutely wrecking rival Drake in a historic beat that saw Lamar drop Not Like Us, his biggest hit to date. GNX is a total victory lap off the back of that success, unleashing a litany of direct hits and West Coast bops that continue the high energy and intensity Kendrick tapped into in this summer of rap vitriol. The record is a celebration of Lamar's city, featuring that classic laid-back G-funk style with subgenres like the Oakland-originated hi-fi sound, as well as weaving in the deep, rich vocals of Mexican vocalist Daira Barrera to reflect Los Angeles' rich Latin culture. There are numerous bangers like Squabble Up and TV Off, but we also get some classically heady K-Dot tracks as well, like Reincarnated. The Smile is the project from Radiohead's Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, working with drummer Tom Skinner, predominantly known for his work on Afrobeat rhythms with the excellent UK jazz act Sons of Kemet. Back in January, the trio released their second record, Wall of Eyes, and it was a revolution for me in that it actually convinced me of the value of this project over Radiohead. I'd been left struggling to see the need for this new group after their first record, A Light for Attracting Attention. I was happy to have obviously more music from York and Greenwood, but it didn't feel distinct from what we've come to expect from their work in Radiohead. And in particular, I felt like Skinner had been really underutilized. Wall of Eyes saw The Smile come into its own, delivering rhythms and textures that felt like a step out of the shadow of its bigger brother band. And the release of cutouts later this year, though not as good as this one, helped further the distinction between the two projects with more great tracks that chart their own path through alternative and avant-garde rock. Hit Me Hard and Soft is the final part of an aesthetic arc that was set up on the Eilish debut, When We All Fall Asleep, and then built on with the follow-up, Happier Than Ever. On Hit Me, Eilish and Phineas continue to mature, to build and evolve their style, but manage to do more with less as far as actual album material goes. There are some really big moments of grandeur that actually breaks their own formula of sparseness, but it's been set up in such a way that going big here is what actually feels subversive and at this point totally earned. A collaboration between Memphis MC Lukah and channel favorite producer Real Bad Man, Temple Needs Water, Village Needs Peace, is an album dedicated to painting pictures of what life could, should, and for some is like outside of life under late stage capitalism. It talks about minimizing the ego, working to support a community, expanding consciousness through a better relationship to the earth. And I don't really do like wholesome or hippy dippy shit in my music, and that is a vibe you definitely could have taken away from the description that I just provided. But the fact is, this record lands with me so well. It comes from the vantage point of protest. It's an embrace of traditional values, but also holds a mirror to our broken society and rejects it. This gives the whole album the edge that I love from hip hop while talking about an altogether different topic. From a production standpoint, Real Bad Man isn't delivering the same level of instant head knockers that they do on many other collaborations, but the reward of this is that the producer gets to really broaden the horizons. And in addition to his amazing work, we also get contributions from Shabaka Hutchins and Portishead guitarist Adrian Utley. Lyrically, there's so much to unpack here. I don't really have time to do it justice right now, but if you like interesting, challenging hip hop, do yourself a favor and check this one out. The songs on Only God Was Above Us are shrouded in a murky kind of haze similar to Vampire Weekend's third record, but explored through Father of the Bride's broad and adventurous instrumental palette. Where Father of the Bride broadened the musical horizons towards Latin and bossa nova styles, though, Only God Was Above Us tries on a kind of neoclassical sensibility. The musicality is actually off the charts, whether it's the kind of abstract back and forth of the piano butting heads with the saxophone on Classical, or the violins that become guitars on Capricorn, and the beautiful extended instrumental break on Connect. It's taken me a really long time with this band, but I kind of see it now, and I think this record is exceptional. Breaking into the top 10 now, and speaking of neoclassical, over now to a pianist who has delivered one of the best albums in the genre. Kelly Moran's new album, Moves in the Field, was sparked during the pandemic. Her longtime instrument partner, Yamaha gifted the composer what is known as a disclavier. It's a full ground piano with the beautiful full sound of a live piano, but it allows the player to program and pre-record sequences or songs. Receiving this at a time where Moran had no one but herself to perform with, her experiments with the instrument, essentially kind of duetting with it, became the basis for this whole record. With this instrument, Moran is able to play against sequences she wouldn't be able to organically for lack of having, like 15 or more fingers. And as a result, she's able to construct these amazing, lush and layered piano pieces without sacrificing any of the live feel. Instead of just layering the parts in a computer, she is kind of playing one part of the composition and then performing against that live, and leaning in and out of that creates flourishes that you wouldn't normally get. The album is completely piano driven from beginning to end for just 45 minutes straight, but it's probably one of the most captivating and beautiful albums I've heard all year. Pause are a band I thought maybe had dissipated. Their 2016 record Gold was a vicious little dispatch of rough, rugged and totally balls out noise rock. It gained quite a lot of notoriety, but seemingly from the outside world they took their toys and went home. They just went. Glorious it was then to hear this band come back in 2024 with War, but the album saw leader Christian Lembach and co find a way to maintain the fuzz, the grime, the viciousness, while punching up the clarity and, well, the punch. In fact, everything on War, not just the mixes or the production, but the arrangements and the riffs, everything has actually been made clearer and more accessible compared to Gold. But miraculously, it does this without compromising any of the balls to the wall aggression or the serrated edges that would sit comfortably on a playlist with bands like Unsane or Bark Market, for instance. If noise rock's your thing and you don't know these guys, change that immediately. Blasted is the most fun I've had in an album form all year. It's power pop, it's pop punk, it's Ramones, it's Vandals, it's Rick Springfield. Blasted to the moon, I don't give a shit anymore, lost my mind. This is just wall to wall bangers. Grab a beer, crank it up and have a laugh. This album's like crack to me, and I hope it is for you too. Miraculously, these noise rock legends have managed to return after 26 years with an album that captures all the grinding ugliness and the virility of their golden age 90s Albini produced era. They open with Hide and Seek, and it's immediately clear the band just aren't fucking around at all. The track punches you right in the face with these huge accented chords before barreling into a chugging sequence that gives way to absolutely unhinged lead guitar segues. It pretty much maintains this potency throughout the next 40 minutes, with frontman David Yao viciously wailing, screaming and growling all the way. This is amazing. This year, Beth Gibbons of Portishead saw fit to grace us with a solo album, and it's just magnificent. Lives Outgrown exists at a meeting point between alternative folk, cinematic chamber pop, and captures a little of that trip hop spirit with occasional flourishes of post-punk and some subtle Eastern flavors. Lyrically, the project explores mortality, spirituality, personal growth, family, and the very earth we walk on. This is actually a masterclass on how to paint with words, how to be artistic and yet definitively outline the theme or concept such that the audience can follow you easily. I feel like this album can very accurately be described as greater than the sum of its parts. The music is masterful, but on top of that, thematically, it's so affecting. It's the cumulative effect, I think, of Gibbons' poetry, the heavenly voice with which that poetry is communicated, and then the contextual kind of knowledge of knowing that even hearing from this artist is a scarce and precious thing all of its own. What Now, to me, is a perfect combination of Brittany Howard's two prior releases as a solo artist. This album blends the artist's incredible ability to write timeless sounding melodies and chord progressions while applying a progressive and almost avant-garde production aesthetic. This creates a sound where everything feels fresh, cutting edge, and quite frankly thrilling, while also having this feeling like you're in safe hands, like these songs have just been around forever. Oh, and Howard also just happens to know how to deliver that Prince-like funk from time to time too. The fearlessness, the integrity of this JPEGMAFIA album is off the scale and delivered like it's nothing. Peggy's out here naming tracks after highly revered iconic albums like DMX's It's Dark and Hell It's Hot, Def Grip's Ex-Military, sampling Wu-Tang's classic Tears beat like it's any old cut off the shelf, poking the bear by using Pantera album titles, sampling Logan Roy from Succession and pulling YouTube AI generated covers even before you have a chance to cry about it. To me, Peggy represents the best of what post-internet music can be, both on a symbolic level, but also just on a musical level. This album bangs. It just depends if you're ready for it or not. The meme around Pratt became so prevalent, so borderline toxic, I almost didn't want to include it. But honestly, look through my listening stats this year and you'll see me coming back to this album time and again and again and again and again. Sympathy is a Knife is one of my favorite songs of the year, and just in general, Pratt's merge of high-low culture and Y2K aesthetics pushed through a lens of hyperpop is unbelievable. I genuinely don't know how we're going to feel about it in 10 years if the spell we're all under might wear off, but as of right now, maybe I don't want to admit it, but this album is such a banger. Dark Times finds Vince Staples exploring similar kind of themes to his previous Ramona Park album, but this time from an even loftier vantage point. His success has continued since we last had a record from him, but so too has his pondering of what that actually means. Despite the heavy themes, the album remains a banger, and the wordplay, the lean and succinct track list, the hit after hit after hit production, for me, it might be his best yet. And were it not for this next album, I think it would have been my album of the year. It's incredible. At number one, we have to go with my most anticipated album of the year that managed to meet my expectations, in fact, just blow my expectations up, and did so with a whisper. It's remarkable, really. This fourth album from Jessica Pratt so perfectly recreates the pristine dreamlike vibes of its predecessor Quiet Signs. It's not actually until you listen to the two side by side that you hear just how much Pratt and her longtime partner Al Coulson have added and embellished to their arrangements this time around. That they've been able to do this without blowing up the intimacy of this artist's beautifully established production aesthetic is truly remarkable, and a testament to the time they've clearly spent on this wonderful piece of work. Re-listening to Quiet Signs after hearing the pitch, I realized just how much of a spell Pratt had cast over me. I knew back when it released that the album was minimal, but certain songs from that record, like As the World Turns and This Time Around, are just a sparsely strummed guitar and a vocal. That's it. And as proof of the absolute masterclass in subtlety we're gifted with on this new one here in the pitch, let's take a song like World on a String. On first appraisal, it could sit quite comfortably with As the World Turns or This Time Around from the last record, those sparse ones I just mentioned, with barely anything to them. But again, it's built around, just a sparsely strummed acoustic guitar and a vocal. It could stay like that and it would be perfect. Yet this time around, Pratt and producer Coulson find a way to create a real drama with a few almost imperceptible touches, a sporadic vocal harmony, an ever so slight shuffle beat, and a delicate string. These beautifully crafted touches barely lift the volume by more than a decibel at most, and yet create a crescendo of a chorus. Some other absolutely majestic touches on the record include the ever so delicate woodblock used on By Hook or By Crook. It's so barely touched, it almost gives an ASMR response thinking about it. The reverb used on it as well is chef's kiss. I also love the feel of the piano on Empire Never Knows. Some of the chord changes just fall a little bit out of the rhythm you'd expect. And again, it adds another layer of dynamism without adding any volume, any overcomplication. It's fantastic. Jessica Pratt herself, the principal songwriter who we have to thank for this absolute gift to music, is of course our guide through the whole record with her timeless vocals. Her phrasing kind of reminds me of the film stars of the 40s with this like transatlantic accent. She's so well spoken and enunciates perfectly with almost no trace of a California lilt. In fact, I had mistaken her for Scandinavian at first when I first became a fan, and this unique voice and phrasing, it's never enough to be intrusive, but just the right amount to be distinctive and almost eerie, but in a really positive way, if such a thing exists. The album ends with The Last Year, which in the hands of anyone else could feel twee with its chorus of, I think we're going to be together and this storyline lasts forever. But it's just such a lovely sentiment handled with such faultless production. You can't help but succumb to its charm. This album is a perfect 10. Okay, if you made it this far, congratulations. Thank you. If you've watched my content this year, I appreciate you. Who knows how long I'll continue. It's like so much work, but every time I see a comment or someone reaches out to me, and many people have over this last year, it's really made me feel good. So thanks. I just love music. I love writing about it, and the fact that anyone cares is cool. So cheers. If it's your first time though, do subscribe. I know I just said I don't know how long I'll continue, but I've got a ton of stuff already made and ready to go that I'll look forward to sharing. And yeah, I've linked below the full reviews of each of these records if you want to go a little bit deeper on any of them. And remember, I've made a ton of playlists, so check out my Spotify top 50 playlist, top 10 honorable mentions, quarterly lists. Cheers everyone, you've been great. Take care. Bye now, you go. Bye.